Hello, everyone. I realize I'm a bit late to the party, probably a month or so late, but Josie the Outlaw released a video a while back titled How I Support the Troops, and it's basically she goes over how she doesn't really support the troops in the way that other Americans do. Um, it talks about how she thinks they only have a misguided idea of, how they're fighting for American freedom and such. Quite inflammatory. You should check it out if you want to see it. It's called How I Support the Troops, I believe, under Josie the Outlaw. But having been a troop myself in the Marine Corps version of a former troop, I thought I would educate young Josie on where she might have, been incorrect in some of her assessments. So, for example, I mean, she makes some pretty outrageous statements, like, the describing the troops as mercenaries with flags, landing in this country all bloodthirsty, and so on and so forth. Here's the reality. Let's talk about what actually motivates troops. Napoleon Bonaparte actually had a pretty good quote on this. He said, actually, let me read it here. Where was so a soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon. The reality is, when I was in Iraq, what I saw was an amazing amount of glory seeking. Specifically concerning, for example, the combat action ribbon. With the Iraq War, the front lines and the fighting back and forth wasn't traditional with, lines and fighting in geographical areas and having battle lines and such. It was really about the convoys. The convoy was sort of the new front lines. So one of the big issues that there was it had recently been dealt with when I was there in 2006 was a convoy would go along and then it'd get hit by an IED. And the rule was you had to actually fire your weapon to get a combat action ribbon. So the problem they had was an IED would go off, guys would run out of their vehicles. Oh, I think he's over there. Bang, bang. Combat action ribbon, please. Oops, I guess it got away, but I fired my weapon. Combat action ribbon. So I guess there was an uproar about that because, I deserve a combat action ribbon if an IED goes off. By the time I got there, the new rule was that if anyone in any vehicle in your convoy gets hit with an IED, the whole convoy gets a combat action ribbon. Now, convoys were spaced out for safety, so if one vehicle gets hit, no one else does. So you could literally be like 5 miles away from the blast and get a combat action ribbon. So, point number one, no, Josie, the troops are not necessarily bloodthirsty. They're ribbon hungry. Get it straight. Totally. Now, bloodthirsty might be a byproduct of that, but in any case, yes, glory seeking was pretty significant. And, there was... let me go over actually what I did. I was in an artillery unit, but when I was shipped over, they didn't need artillery. They needed prison guards. So they essentially used us as prison guards. And each platoon operated a facility that was sort of like a temporary holding facility before they were actually charged with something. They had to either charge them with something or release them within 2 weeks. So those were the kind of facilities we ran. In any case, there was a captain, the platoon commander of another facility, wanted to go on a convoy one time. And they took volunteers from us to go on convoys. Just, if they needed a few extra bodies, if somebody wanted to go, they would just take volunteers from us, prison guard people. And they always got filled. They were always young, eager guys that wanted to go on these convoys. At the time, I didn't really give a shit about anything, but I was toward the end of my deployment, end of my military enlistment. So one time, this captain from this other facility wanted to lead a convoy. Now, he's in charge of a prison facility, but he wants to go on a convoy, you see, because that's where the glory is. So, and we also had prisoner transfers, so sometimes we would transfer them to them, and some of our Marines from our platoon would go over there. So there were a couple of our Marines at this facility for a couple of days, and this captain wanted a convoy to go, but you have to have a certain number of people in order to approve that convoy, and he didn't have enough. So what he did is he basically drafted the Marines from our platoon into this convoy, and a convoy went out that did not need to go. What happened was that convoy got hit with an IED, and it was actually the captain's vehicle that got hit, but his only injury was a concussion. So the really messed up part is that this captain got everything he wanted. The convoy went, and he got a concussion, which actually gives him a Purple Heart. So he gets to say he led a convoy in Iraq and was wounded in combat. He gets all the glory points that he was looking for. The really fucked up part is that our Marines went on a convoy that didn't need to go, and had a different vehicle gotten hit, he could have killed our guys because he wanted to go on a convoy. This is the kind of really messed up sort of glory seeking that goes on. To give you an idea of how bad it was, I mean, that was a captain, a platoon commander, a fairly high ranking, little high rank for a platoon commander, but I mean that was a platoon commander level. My entire battalion level command staff got relieved of duty and sent home from Iraq. That's how bad it was. Why? Because a battalion level command, that's like you're in charge of like 1,000 people. Okay, and there were like 4 different facilities across Iraq that we were all, running these little detention centers. We're talking about like a full bird colonel, and I believe not a first sergeant, master sergeant. Anyway, these are like top level guys in a battalion, full bird colonel. They got sent home because they were going on convoys. Like the colonel and like his enlisted guy, that staff, they were going on convoys because that's where the glory was. They weren't in the office doing their job. So, and I mean, basically, to relieve a battalion level command, a general has to come in and do it. And that's what happened. A general came and sent them home because they were... It's the equivalent of like a CEO wanting to run a cashier, a cash register, because that's, for whatever, let's say it was a cooler job. The CEO is just running a cash register instead of running the battalion or the company. So that gives you an idea of how bad it could be. There were all kinds of stories of COs, commanding officers, the heads of massive units. They of course would procure for themselves high-speed weapons that looked like they were, badass special operators. So, you're an officer in charge of a large unit. Your job is really mostly administrative. But of course they would procure for themselves, the M4s, and then they would get custom camo on it. Custom cami on their M4s like it's Call of Duty. And they just unlock the top level camo because they're like, level 50 prestige or whatever the hell it is. That happened all the time. Like commanding officers with custom camo M4s, first sergeants kicking indoors when this is, something the lower level grunts really should be doing. It's their war. This is their chance, man. This is their chance to shine. So, just wanted to address the whole glory-seeking thing. And then, of course, the comments section of this video. There are plenty of people that pointed out, well, young, naive Josie doesn't understand, that what she's protected from, what these troops go through to protect her from the evils of the world that would keep her from being able to say these things. So, I just wanted to give you an idea of just what exactly we protected Josie from. In Iraq, there's a desert. And in that desert, there are hyphenated names. So, the general strategy, from what I could tell, we had all kinds of people rotating through our facility. And usually these were from home raids or something like that, where they brought people in. And what would happen is there was a list of hyphenated names, and said list would be given to Marine grunts. And Marine grunts would go out and look for hyphenated names, usually with Muhammad in there somewhere. Or if it wasn't Muhammad, it'd be like Mahmud or Mahmud al-Muhammad. Just hyphenated names with like variations of Muhammad in them. You give them to Marine grunts and they go look for that. I saw many people come back. They bring people in and then we'd end up releasing them because we didn't have it. There's no reason to keep them. But then they kept coming back. And usually it was because they were on a list they couldn't get off of. Does that sound familiar at all, America? That kind of came full circle, didn't it? That seemed to be the general strategy to me. And, how did people get on these lists? There was an interrogation I overheard once where the interrogator was talking to one of the guys that we had detained. And I guess he was on a list. And the interrogator said, well, your neighbor told us that you're a terrorist. Why would he lie? Why would he lie about you being a terrorist? And I thought this guy's response was actually pretty great. He said, who, that guy? Well, I hate that guy. He hates me. We've hated each other for like 20 years. His dog craps in my yard and I trimmed a tree too close to his property, blah, blah, something like that. Of course he's going to tell you I'm a terrorist to the biggest gang in town that's going to take me away. Like, we've hated each other for years. This is how people get on lists of hyphenated names that, Americans are kicking in doors for. So I just thought that was interesting. And then there were just an interesting array of characters that rotated through our facility. For one, we started noticing that everybody that came in when we checked their birth dates, it was like that movie. Is it called Motel? I think there's a movie called Motel with John Cusack where everybody has the same birthday. And it was similar. It was like everyone had one of two birthdays, January 1st or I believe July 1st. And we started asking, like, what is this deal with the birthdays? Apparently, Saddam made a law at some point that said, if you're born between January 1st and July 1st, your birthday is January 1st. If you're born in the last half of the year, your birthday is July 1st. Apparently, this just made it easier for government bureaucrats to keep track of things. So people literally forgot when their birthdays were. It was just they all had the same birthdays, one of two birthdays. On top of that, there were people we brought in. We would ask them how old they were. They had no idea. Like, they literally had no idea. They just don't celebrate birthdays. I guess they're just glad to be alive if they're alive, and they just don't keep track of birthdays. They had no idea how old they were. Some of the guys we brought in were shepherds. And when I say shepherds, I mean shepherds. I mean shepherds watch their flocks by night. Angels appear to them in the Bible. Shepherds. Like, it hasn't changed in the past couple thousand years. They were often the ones that didn't know how old they were, that didn't have birthdays. And it was just amazing that these people were even brought in. Yeah, I don't know what the deal was there. Oh, and then the midgets. We had there were at least two, if I recall. There might have been 3 midgets that rotated through our facility. Keep in mind, this is a 6-month period. In a period of 6 months, we get 2 to 3 midgets rotating through our facility. At that point, I can only assume the grunts are doing it on purpose. Like, they're driving along and it's like, dude, it's a midget. Let's take him in. It'll be hilarious. We'll say it's this like 6'8" guy that's on this list we're supposed to be looking for. I don't know what the deal was, but yeah, that was kind of interesting. I can only assume they're doing it for sport once it's 2 or 3. So anyway, I mean, to answer Josie's question, I mean, obviously this young naive woman doesn't understand the freedom she has, and she's just lucky that we were over there protecting her from hyphenated names, men without birthdays, ancient shepherds, and legions of midgets that all would have descended on the United States and implemented Sharia law. I mean, granted, that's what would have happened. So, yeah, that's what we apparently protected her from. And that's the only reason she has the freedom to point out the inconvenient truth that military service has fuck all to do with your freedoms.